Welcome to the UCLI Legal Lounge, a podcast helping you on your journey to law school. My name is Sabrina Ruiz-Monroy, and I'm the Associate Director at UCLI. Each episode, we interview law students, lawyers, and law admissions experts to bring you insight and tips on making the path to law school a little bit easier. This podcast is brought to you by the Utah Center for Legal Inclusion, or UCLI for short. UCLI is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing the goals of fairness, opportunity, and inclusion in Utah's legal profession. Learn more at utahcli.org. Our episode this week is brought to you by the Utah Podcast Studio. Utah Podcast Studio is a premier recording facility located in West Jordan, Utah, dedicated to empowering creators by providing a world-class environment for audio and video production. Their mission is to amplify voices with confidence and clarity, fostering a creative space where impactful stories are shared and communities are built. Learn more about them at utahpodcaststudio.com. And for today's episode, I'm joined by Zachary Smith. Zachary is the Regional Director for the Central Region of AccessLex Institute Center for Education and Financial Capability, where he's a key member of the Education Services team. AccessLex Institute is a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving access to legal education and helping students make informed financial decisions throughout their law school journey and beyond. Zachary brings a global perspective to his work, shaped in part by his experience interning in Egypt, an opportunity that deepened his appreciation for the unique stories and backgrounds that shape each individual's path. In his role, he's passionate about connecting with students from diverse cultures and empowering them with the tools and knowledge to navigate the financial side of becoming a lawyer. Welcome, and thank you for being here, Zachary. I'm really excited.
Of course, excited to be here and excited to chat through all the big changes coming to the law school financial aid space.
Yeah, and it's a lot. So I think these steps are really going to help these students navigate a very arduous, journey. And there's just a lot of complexities in the changes that are happening now. And I know students keep emailing us about it. They're like, Sabrina, are you complete? And I'm like, I have no idea. So this is a perfect episode. Just again, very grateful. But let's start broad, I guess. When students think about paying for law school, Zachary, should they be focusing on something specific? What do you think they should be focusing on?
At AccessLex, we always encourage students to start by building their budget or their spending plan for law school ahead of time. And that first step is going to become even more important with those upcoming changes. So what that looks like is inventorying what resource the student has coming into the process. What kind of money are they bringing in the form of savings or 529 accounts, other sources of personal money that are coming into the process, and then taking a look at what some of that scholarship funding they might be awarded looks like, and then figuring out, okay, between the resources I'm bringing into the process and the scholarships I'm being awarded, is there going to be some sort of funding gap between the money I have available and what I'm actually going to need to make law school a reality? And then it's about figuring out, okay, how am I going to fill that funding gap? Is my federal student loan eligibility going to cover that? Or am I going to need to think about a mix of federal student loans and private student loans? And what is that process going to look like?
Wow. So in essence, just a big Excel sheet with all of those questions they should probably have on there. Okay. Those are a lot of considerations for sure. I mean, I'm thinking about the students from our previous cohort in UCLI's pre-law fellowship program. These students are getting accepted right now or have been accepted into law schools. What is the ideal timeline for applying for those said scholarships? And is it too late to apply after your acceptance, or what do you think about that?
Absolutely. So a lot of outside or third-party scholarships, so scholarships coming from organizations that are not necessarily the law school that the student is attending, tend to have rolling application windows throughout the year. So even if they've missed maybe some scholarship deadlines already, there are going to be other scholarships that open up during this process. So as incoming 1Ls, there are absolutely still scholarships out there that are available to apply for. Great place to go and look for those would be the AccessLex Law School Scholarship Data Bank. It's the one place on the internet with only third-party scholarships related to a legal education.
Gotcha. Well, I guess what do you say to those students who might be thinking, Sabrina, Zachary, okay, I'm going to go to the database, but there are so many students applying as well. I'm not going to get anything. What do you say to a student like that?
The data bank is set up with ways to filter through the scholarships, and my general recommendation is start as specific as possible. Look
Mm,
for scholarships that really relate to you, whether it's a demographic or a specific area of law that you're interested in practicing. Start really specific and then work your way more broad, because the more specific the scholarship is, the fewer applicants that scholarship is going to have, and the more likely you are to be awarded that scholarship. And then the broader that you get, the more applicants are going to be
right.
in that pool. So the less and less likely it would be for you to be awarded one of those scholarships. So start
Mm,
detailed and then work your way out from there.
I love that. Okay, I think that's really practical advice as well. And these students are most likely going to be, I think, balancing applying to those scholarships that are third party affiliated while also trying to negotiate with the current scholarships that they might have received from schools. Is there, I guess, any kind of recommendation or balance that you have, uh, recommendation in balancing that for students that you can offer or think of?
Absolutely. So the scholarship reconsideration process through the school, that is typically going to be a scholarship that you are being awarded for up to the 3 years you're going to be in law
Mm,
school, assuming that you maintain your eligibility for that scholarship throughout. So I would probably put emphasis on that process first, because a lot of third party scholarships tend to be awarded 1 year at a time. So I would try to lock down that funding. That's going to be, that full 3 years first. And then when you're starting looking at those third party scholarships, I would look for those multi year scholarships first,
mm,
and then move on to scholarships that are only going to be for one academic year. Because again, the more free money that we can lock down for the process early on,
the
the
better.
better we're going to be set up
Right.
for success financially during law school.
Right. And more money like that. That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for answering that, Zachary. And I think I'm thinking about right now those students, like I previously said, in our cohort, who they're getting accepted. They're at that point where they're like, okay, I'm getting this scholarship. I'm negotiating. I'm trying to find those third party ones as well. And then some of them are also figuring out how to budget for their seat deposits as well. Do you know if students, is it even a possibility for students to ask for seat deposit waivers? I know have talked a little bit about that before in the past. What would you say to that, or any guidance for that?
Yeah, it never hurts to ask the
Yeah.
admissions office if there is a waiver available. The worst thing that the admissions office is going to say is no, we
No.
don't have one of those available. So it never hurts to ask, and that goes for seat deposits. That goes for application fee waivers. That goes for LSAC waivers. All of those things kind of
Mm.
fall into that same bucket. It never hurts to ask. Worst thing they're going to say is no.
Gotcha. So I guess something similar to how students would negotiate for more scholarships from schools as well. I'd imagine it's something similar to that process, right?
Similar, a lot of schools will have very formal processes for their scholarship reconsideration
Mm,
process.
gotcha.
Some schools, it will be a little bit more informal. It just depends on the law school that you're applying to.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. And my next question, I guess, is I think it's a good one for any pre law student and even those in law school to consider about their starting points. But what do you think are some of the main pitfalls that students encounter financially when making their plan for paying paying for law school?
Now, there are a lot of things that come up financially
Yeah.
during the law school process. So there's a lot of potential pitfalls out there. I would say one of the most common ones, and this does not apply just to law students, it is professional students across the board.
Mm,
Um, One of the biggest expenses you're going to run into outside of tuition and fees is your housing for the time that you are
mm,
in law school. And a lot of students
wow.
tend to lock down their housing before they have finalized their budget. for the year. And what that does is if you over index into the housing and your housing is a little bit more expensive than maybe was included in your cost of attendance or in what you are trying to keep your borrowing to during law school,
Right.
if we lock in that lease, it is really hard to get out of that lease and
Right.
try to get something cheaper. Another thing we tend to see is this reticence to have roommates during the law school process, which I totally understand as an introvert myself. Not really be looking for roommates during the process, but that is one of the ways to make housing more affordable while we're going through the law school process. So what I would say is keep your housing options open and be open to finding cheaper ways to find somewhere to live during law school, because that is, outside of tuition fees, again, going to be our single largest expense during the process. And if we can keep those costs down, we can keep the rest of our loan borrowing down, and that is going to set us up for financial success post law school.
That's really, really helpful. And I mean, yeah, I've been there sharing spaces with roommates before to save money. So I think that's something that, hopefully can become an idea for some people to consider. It's not the best thing sometimes, but I think that's really valuable. And I guess in your experience, Zachary, do you know what, I guess, resources some of the law schools might offer in terms of the housing, or if anything that you've heard of before? If not, that's okay, but I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Oh, some law schools will have on campus housing that may be a little bit cheaper than what you
Gotcha.
can get out in the housing market.
Mm.
That being said, it also never hurts to chat with the admissions office, see if they have like a roommate board or something like
Oh,
that, where they're connecting students in the class with each other for potential
oh wow.
housing situations and things like that. Never hurts to ask. And then as you begin to meet your classmates, if you're still looking for roommates,
Talk to
again,
them. Yeah.
maybe you only room with them for 1 year and then find something else. But maybe you're able to keep that housing cost lower for that 1L year, especially. So again, never hurts to ask if there are resources related to that that the school has on hand.
Gotcha. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. And I think, I don't know, I think oftentimes students get nervous asking what they assume are stupid questions, or, oh no, that's a dumb question, Sabrina, I don't want to ask. Ask it anyways, because I can guarantee you someone else is thinking it. And if you ask it, the worst thing that can happen is what you said, right? They say no. That's okay,
Yep.
So I really appreciate that. My next question is about borrowing, but specifically as students are considering the housing aspects, as they're considering obviously the cost of tuition and loans in general, what's too much, Zach? How should students think about borrowing? I think that's an important thing to cover for sure. So I'm excited to hear about this.
Whenever we talk about personal finance, there is rarely a one size fits all
Yeah.
solution or route. So, what I would say is there isn't a one size fits all amount that I would consider to be too much for a law student.
Mm,
What I would consider an appropriate borrowing amount is really going to depend on what your goals are for after law school. And I would say that any loan amount that is going to prevent you from being able to reach those goals would be what I would consider too much. So, in
mm,
this case, if we know we really want to go into a career in public service, so we know that we're going to have probably a lower paying salary right out of law school, we really want to keep the vast majority of our borrowing within the federal loan options so that we can utilize those income driven repayment plans and potentially pursue public service loan forgiveness. So, if a student interested in public service was maxing out their federal loans every year and taking out private student loans, I would have some questions about what their plans are to repay those loans post law school, because given their likely career outcomes, that might be putting them in a tough spot after law
mm.
school. So, Short answer is
Yeah.
whatever is going to prevent you from meeting your goals post law school, that is what I would consider probably being too much. And that number is going to look a little bit different for everyone. It's going to depend on their budget, their spending plan, and their particular goals after law school.
Gotcha. And I think that's a really important aspect to think about as a pre-law student. If you're listening to this and you're going, okay, I'm budgeting and I'm thinking about how I'm going to go to law school and pay for law school. I think oftentimes they forget about the after part. Like, what are your goals long term? Do you want to be in the public service kind of sector of society, or do you want to do corporate law? I think those are really important because some pay more than others, right? So I love that. That's a really great consideration, Zach. Thanks so much. With the aspect of borrowing, there definitely have been a lot of conversations about the new federal changes with loans. And that is something that is honestly, it's scaring a lot of students. It's scaring those who are trying to prep for this. So, I guess, could you break down that process, what the new changes are, Zach? That'd be great.
At a high level, there are two primary categories of changes that are coming to particularly the federal student aid and the federal student loan landscapes. The first group of changes is coming to those annual loan limits, those lifetime loan limits,
Mm.
and the types of federal student loans that we're going to have access to. And then the second major group of changes is the changes to the repayment process. And for both of these, there are some important dates that we need to keep in mind, which we'll chat through here in a little bit. But those are the big changes coming. So the big one that we're really concerned about is in that change to what loan programs are going to be available, and that is the fact that the Grad Plus loan is not going to be an option for students starting a new program after July 1st of this year. That is probably the single biggest change that is
Mm.
really going to heavily affect this cohort of incoming 1Ls.
Gotcha. Okay. And then there, I think, is a program or a specific loan called OBBBA or OBA. Could you speak a little bit more? And I'm so sorry if I pronounced that
No,
wrong
you're
or if
good.
I said it incorrectly, but how will that impact law students specifically, and what is it?
Yeah, so OBBA stands for the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is also known as HR 1. So it was a reconciliation
Mm.
bill that was passed by Congress. It was a broad tax and spending bill that touched many personal finance areas for a lot of Americans. And in particular, there are some pretty big changes coming to the federal student aid and federal student loan landscape that will heavily affect incoming 1L students.
Mm. And so, as that is obviously going to be affecting those 1Ls, how should they be pivoting? What kind of changes should they be making?
Absolutely. So, because that Grad Plus loan program is going away, historically, students could come be accepted into a law school. They would receive their federal direct unsubsidized loan eligibility as long as they had submitted their FAFSA. And then whatever funding gap they ran into, they could pretty reliably get that covered by the Grad Plus loan. It was pretty rare
Oh, wow.
that professional students needed an endorser, or which is the federal version of a cosigner, to be able to qualify for that program. So they were
Mm.
pretty set. As long as they got accepted into the school they were interested in going to, they were going to have some form of federal financial aid option that was available, and that is really changing. So
Mm.
students will still receive that federal direct loan, federal direct unsubsidized loan eligibility, but they're not going to have that supplementary Grad Plus offer. So if they think that they're going to need to borrow in addition to those federal student loans, they really want to start planning around what that private loan application process is going to look like pretty early in the process. And a big part of that may be talking to people that might be willing to co sign on the loan
Wow.
with
Okay.
them. One of
Mm.
our major concerns is that a lot of students who need a private student loan will not be able to qualify for one on their own.
Mm.
And so having those cosigner conversations early does a couple of things for you. It sets those expectations with whoever your cosigner is very early on. And it also gives you that peace of mind if you are going to apply on your own first, that if you are denied for that loan, that you do have that backup plan in place already in the form of a cosigner that may be able to help you qualify for the loan. Or if you already qualified for the loan, they may be able to help you get a lower interest rate on that
Mm.
private student loan.
Wow. That was a lot of information. I think that is really, really insightful. Students should be having those conversations early on. And I
Yeah.
didn't even think about that. So that thank you. I really appreciate that. With that, if we could pivot to borrowing limits, let's talk numbers, Zach. I'm really
Yeah.
interested here about this, but what are the annual and lifetime federal loan limits for law students?
So historically, the loan limits were $20,500 per academic year in the federal direct unsubsidized loan program. And between our undergrad, master's, and professional school borrowing, law students were limited to a lifetime limit of 138,500 in
Oh
the
wow.
aggregate. So those numbers are changing and they are going up. So now law students will have access to, after July 1st of 2026, up to $50,000 a year in that federal direct unsubsidized loan. And
Wow.
then the aggregate limit just for professional school study is going up to $200,000 in the aggregate or over their lifetime. Um, Although those loan limits are going up, that is coming at the same time that that Grad Plus loan limit or that Grad Plus loan program is being phased out. So
Mm.
we've got kind of one option being taken off the table, an increase in the one option that is available to us, but depending on the law school and the law school's cost of attendance that we are planning on going to, uh, that $50,000 federal direct unsubsidized loan may not cover everything.
Right.
And so, with that Grad Plus loan going away, we're expecting a much greater emphasis on private student loans moving forward, especially
Mm.
at schools where that cost of attendance exceeds what that annual federal student loan eligibility is.
Gotcha. And what happens to that student that hits the limit or reaches that limit?
Yeah, so once you've hit your federal aggregate limit for federal direct unsubsidized loans, it just means you cannot receive any additional federal
Mm.
student loans. So then your primary loan option become those private student loans. And whenever I say private student loans, there's a few different types of loans that get rolled up into that. They're
Mm.
the traditional private education loans that we think of coming from banks and credit unions. But
Right.
there are also a lot of state sponsored student loan programs that are out there. And those often are a little bit easier to qualify for. And so I would encourage students to look into if there are state sponsored programs. I mean, we actually have a database of those as well in
Oh
the
wow.
AccessLex private loan exchange. That
Mm.
is just a central depository of some state based lenders that we know about, as well as some of the bigger players in the private student loan market. We've got a breakdown of different loan programs that are available, the interest rates, and a lot of really good information out there if students are needing to navigate that private student loan process.
Mm. Well, and would you say then? I mean, you just talked about encouraging students to definitely do that state research, but would you have them go there first then before reaching out to any of the other banks to see what their options might be for the state one?
Yeah, it really depends. It's going to depend on what the interest rates are for that
Right.
state program. If the state program has greater flexibility during
Mm.
repayment than maybe some of the private lenders, some of the state programs will have more flexibilities and will have lower interest rates, but some of the state programs won't. So it is going to be
Mm.
very state dependent. And it will be dependent on the student's personal credit,
Gotcha.
and where they're at with their credit, because they may be able to qualify for a private student loan, a traditional private student loan, at a lower rate than maybe what the state sponsored loan is offering, especially if they're coming into the process with a cosigner. The state program may or may not be better than the private loan options that are available in their state.
So no guarantee, but to kind of prep that way. I mean, there are going to be these students who are preparing for, okay, I'm going to max out. So let me go the private loan way. Apart from saying to them, hey, John or Rebecca, make sure your credit score is really great. what other two, I guess, quick statements would you say to that student who's kind of preparing for that reality? They're going to max out. So what would you say to them?
So one of the big things is that credit score by itself is not going to be the single determining factor of whether we're approved and if we get good interest rate offers. A lot of these private lenders also want to see evidence of current income. And as you know, most 1Ls are either encouraged not to work or prohibited from working during their 1L year. So that current income requirement often trips up a lot of students, which is why that cosigner on the application can be so helpful, because the cosigner's current income can then step in that process and help the student's application look a little bit better. So that would kind of be the one big thing I would point out. Is that it's not just going to be your credit score. You can have a fantastic credit score and still be approved for a loan at a very high interest rate if the bank is not liking what they're seeing on the debt to income ratios or that current income side of things.
And I'd love to ask another question here, specifically about some other options or forms of paying for law school. And I think there's a lot of confusion over this, but if you could tell us a little bit more about what is public service loan forgiveness and whether or not it's still a viable program, I think that'd be really helpful for those listening and watching.
So real quick, there are kind of two broad categories here. So we've got public service loan forgiveness. That is a federal loan forgiveness program, and it is available to law students all over the country. So regardless of where you go to law school, you may have the ability to utilize public service loan forgiveness.
Oh, wow.
The programs that are law school specific, those are typically referred to as loan repayment assistance programs.
Gotcha.
A lot of law schools will have those, and they can often be used at the same time as you're pursuing public service loan forgiveness. But I would not just stop my search for loan repayment assistance programs at my law school. They are becoming increasingly common at the state level, so I would look into whether or not my state has an LRAP program. I know the ABA's website used to have a list of the various LRAP programs available through schools across the country, and I believe they also have a database of the state-sponsored programs as well. But another category that I would look at is through potential employers. Loan repayment assistance programs are becoming a lot more common as an employment benefit as well. But let's pivot back to public service loan forgiveness, because there is quite a bit of chatter around that program, and there is always kind of this low-level risk that the program could go away, and there's just this broad level of concern around public service loan forgiveness. So the key thing to understand about the program is it was put in place by Congress. So in order for the program to go away as a whole, that needs to be something that happens through Congress, and we just historically have not seen enough support in Congress to get rid of the program as a whole. That being said, the department can make minor changes to the program through a process called negotiated rulemaking, and we actually have seen them go through that process in the last year, and they just released the final rule at the end of 2025 about what they're trying to do to limit the employers that qualify for the program. And there's some, there were, as soon as that final rule was published, there were lawsuits that were filed against the final rule. We don't need to get too far into the weeds of exactly what's going on with the final rule. It's supposed to go into effect July 1st of 2026. But with those pending lawsuits, we really don't know for sure if that rule
Mm.
is going to end up going into effect. So, broadly, the program is still available, it is still viable. If anything, there may be some changes to what types of employers may qualify for the program.
Gotcha.
But broadly speaking, the program is still available. It is still a viable program. I've spoken with a ton of borrowers and even some administrators at schools I've worked with that have gotten their loans forgiven through the program as recently as a couple of months ago.
Okay, that makes me feel really great. I think I was a little bit nervous about that because I do know that there have been some changes. I'm like, I don't know what's still out there, what is still, accessible for students. Now, are any of those changes affecting the way that students can qualify? And I guess broadly, for you to answer, who can qualify for this kind of program?
Yeah, so let's start broad and then we can address the
Sure.
changes. So broadly,
Great.
we qualify for the program if we are working for a qualifying employer. So qualifying employers are a level of government, federal, state, local, or tribal governments all qualify for the program, and registered nonprofits. So registered 501c3s, employees of nonprofits and government organizations qualify for the program. But in addition to working for a qualifying employer, they also need to be making payments on their student loans in a qualifying repayment plan. And this is a big thing that is changing in terms of the repayment options for students that have new federal student loans after July 1st of this year. So after July 1st of 2026, they're only going to have one repayment plan option that qualifies for public service loan forgiveness, whereas historically students had about five different repayment plans that
Whoa,
they could choose from
big drop.
that would be public service loan forgiveness eligible. So there's a big shift in which
Mhm.
repayment plans will be eligible for the plan. And then what I mentioned earlier is that negotiated rulemaking process that the Department of Education went through in order to, they kicked off that process to try to limit the types of employers that would qualify as qualifying employers under the program. So what they're trying to do is basically weed out any employers that have a substantially illegal purpose. So there's a lot of confusion over exactly what that looks like, over
Right.
exactly what kind of authority the Secretary of Education is going to have during that process. So there's still quite a few questions that are up in the air about functionally what that final rule would look like and what the process of disqualifying an employer that had previously qualified for the program is going to look like.
Hmm.
And then, of course, with that pending litigation, there are questions about whether the rule is even going to be allowed to go into effect or not. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it at the moment. But if you do ever have questions, studentaid.gov is going to be one of the primary sources for information around public service loan forgiveness. And then organizations like AccessLex or other members of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Coalition would be great places to go for information about any changes on the program. What I would avoid and encourage students to avoid is reading about the program on big news sites. They tend to not have the most accurate information, and they do tend to sensationalize some of the changes and overgeneralize a lot of things that are going on with the program.
Yeah, well, and they have their own initiatives, so I really appreciate that. I think that really clarified, hopefully also demystified some aspects of that program. So thank you, Zach. And I guess for students who are considering, this public interest sector, what steps do you think what steps do you think they need to take now, especially maybe those who are law students right now?
I hate to sound like a broken record, but
Yeah.
for these students, there is a greater need than ever to practice that budget-based borrowing and keep their borrowing as low as possible during the law school process. Ideally, what that means for students interested in public interest or public service work is trying to keep all of their borrowing within their federal student loan limits so that all of their loans qualify for public service loan forgiveness. All of their loans qualify for those income driven repayment plans, which are the plans that tend to be public service loan forgiveness eligible. So again, practicing that budget-based borrowing, making sure we
Yeah.
are keeping our borrowing as much as humanly possible within the federal ecosystem is going to set those students up for
Mm.
success.
And then, what are some of the most common reasons that borrowers are denied public service loan forgiveness?
Yeah, so the primary reasons that students end up being denied for public service loan forgiveness is when their paperwork is not all in order.
Gotcha.
So, part of the public service loan forgiveness process is we have to certify our employment every year,
Mm.
and payments will only count towards the program if they are made during a period of time that we have certified. And so this is the most common area where students believe they have hit the required number of payments for the program, which is 120 total payments. They think they have hit that, but for whatever reason, the Department of Education is showing that they have less payments that have qualified than what the student believes. And that is typically a paperwork issue. So again, most common reason is clerical stuff,
Gotcha.
where there's payments that maybe should have been counting, but weren't made during a period of time that the student is certified, or maybe they did certify it and that process, that paperwork is still making its way through the federal student aid and the Department of Education, and so it's just a waiting game. But that is the primary reason that students are denied public service loan forgiveness is when there is a clerical error or a clerical issue.
Mm. So it sounds like for the most part, students are, the majority are able to get it. So that's hopefully gives some students some hope, and especially those who are wanting to enter into the public interest sector, and that they can do that, but plan for it. Like you said, plan
Correct.
for it, budget for it. So I really appreciate that, Zach. And I'd love to go into something that we briefly mentioned here, which was the private loans. And yeah, we've got some questions there. I think we've now have talked about the public interest areas, but now going back to private loans, because students know, hey, okay, I'm not going to receive enough scholarships here, or I have to consider cost of attendance, and that's going to have me really, I'm going to be pushed to apply for these private loans. What, I guess, what makes the most sense for what you would advise students to take out private loans? Like, when is it 100% like, yes, you need to take out the private loans because of X, Y, and Z reasons, and some considerations beforehand?
Yeah. So big ones would be if we have that funding gap
Mm-hmm.
after we have our scholarship offer,
Right.
after we have utilized our federal student loan eligibility, if there is still a remaining funding gap, private student loans do tend to be kind of that last option. And that is how we would encourage students to look at it. You want to fully explore your free money options.
Right.
You want to fully explore your federal student loan options, and then begin considering those private student loans. And some of the most practical pieces of advice here is you want to shop around, just like any other type of consumer loan you may be considering. You want to look at several different lenders. A lot of these lenders give you the ability to get pre-qualified, so see what potential interest rates you might qualify for without affecting your credit score. So you can get pre-qualified at multiple different places and see what your options are. But there are some differences in how private student loans function that you want to be aware of. One of the big ones is all federal student loans have fixed interest rates. So meaning that interest rate on that loan is never going to change over the lifetime of the loan. Private student loan lenders will offer both fixed and variable interest rate loans, and oftentimes they will try to price those variable interest rate loans in a way that makes those look a little bit more attractive. So when we talk about fixed and variable interest rate loans, I do compare it a little bit to gambling, and how if we go
Okay.
to a casino The house is set up to win 99 times out of 100. If we're looking at variable interest rate loans, the bank is pricing those in a way that is going to be set up for the bank to win
Hmm.
99 times out of 100. It is really not there to be a benefit to us, the consumer. It is there to benefit the bank. The other thing with a variable interest rate loan is because that interest rate can change and fluctuate over the lifetime of the loan, we don't know exactly what our loan payments are going to look like from
Hmm.
year to year as that interest rate fluctuates. So if we want to know exactly what our loan payments are going to look like
Choose the
over
fixed one.
repayment,
Yeah.
choose the fix, because
Gotcha.
then we can know exactly how much we're going to pay every payment. We'll know exactly how much we're going to pay in interest over the whole lifetime of the loan. Those numbers can all be calculated ahead of time,
You can
whereas we can't
prepare.
really do that with a
Yeah.
variable interest rate loan.
Wow, they're sneaky with that for sure. So, and that was my next question: is what can students avoid then? But it sounds like that was probably the biggest aspect, right? Is there anything else that students should be aware of and what to avoid?
Yeah, so there are a few different things. So, being careful about that fixed versus variable interest rate. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it's never to say that a variable interest rate is never going to be a good choice, but you
Mm-hmm.
really want to be informed going into
Gotcha.
that process, is what I would say there.
Mm.
Another big thing you want to look at is the fees that are
Okay.
associated with the loan. So, a lot of loans no longer carry origination fees, which is great, which means we get the entire loan amount that we applied for and nothing gets taken out before it gets dispersed to us. But other fees to watch out for, especially if we're in the boat where we want to get pretty aggressive with student loan repayment and make extra payments or try to pay off the loans early. We want to make sure that the loans do not have any prepayment penalties or any prepayment fees, because
Mm.
that would potentially make paying off our loans early a little bit more expensive. Um, Other major things to look for would be, especially if we're going to have a cosigner on our application, we want to look for lenders that offer a cosigner release clause or a cosigner release option, where the cosigner is released from any further responsibility on the loan after the
Mm.
borrower has made a certain number of successful payments.
Mm.
Not only does that help the cosigner down the line, but it actually makes it easier as the borrower to go ask somebody to cosign on a loan for us, because the cosigner knows that they may not necessarily have to be
They're
on
not
the
tied
line
to
for
it
the
forever.
loan
Right.
exactly for the entire time that we're in repayment. And then, kind of the last big category of things I would really encourage students to look at and consider heavily is the repayment options that
Mm.
are going to be available through that private lender. Each private lender is going to have different repayment options,
Yeah.
different repayment flexibilities. Some places will offer, just a 5 and a 10 year repayment option, and that's it.
Mm.
Some may offer slightly longer. Some may have flexibilities around what if I lose a job and I have no income for a little bit? Can
Oh
I get a
wow.
forbearance on
Huh.
my loan? Some lenders will have way more generous forbearance options than maybe some other lenders will. And then things like, if I were to die, not something we want to think about, but if I were to die, will my student loans be discharged by this lender, or will they go after members of my family to try to have them pay those
Wow.
student loans and things like that? So there are some quite a few loan elements that
Yeah.
students are going to need to think through. But we've got
Y-
a ton of resources here at AccessLex that can help students walk through that process in an informed way. The private loan exchange being one of those, but we also have a guide to private student loans that walks students through a lot of what I just talked about,
mm.
and more about the details of the application process.
Wow. I really appreciate that, especially the ending part where there are realities to these programs, or I guess the loans. And yeah, sometimes when somebody does pass away, that goes to your kids, right? So, and I guess with that, I'd love to kind of continue with that theme of maybe a non-traditional student, those who have families, those who maybe even those who are veterans, right, or who are actively in service as being a part of the military. What kind of financial resources and or programs would you say are available to those non-traditional students that you're aware of?
Yeah, so this is going to be a pretty broad range of resources.
Right.
So for students who are non-traditional, where maybe you have taken some time off, maybe
Mm-hmm.
you've been out in the workforce working for a while, chances are you've got some savings that maybe more traditional age law students just don't have access to. So you might be able to fund a greater amount of your law school journey through some savings that you have set aside specifically for the law school process. For members of the military in particular, or sometimes even their dependents, there are military education benefits that can
Mm-hmm.
absolutely be used for a professional program. So, at the federal level, there are a few different military education benefit programs, including post 9/11 GI, as well as Chapter 35 benefits that vocational rehab, or Chapter 31 is another one for any veterans that have a disability rating through the VA. So there are quite a few federal programs. And then this is another area where there are also sometimes some state level
Oh,
assistance
gotcha.
for veterans and their dependents as well. So it definitely look into that, especially if you've already used maybe your GI Bill eligibility. Then it's still definitely worth seeing if the state has any state level military education benefits as well. Um,
Mm.
Other things to keep in mind for non traditional students, especially if you are coming into law school with dependents. Our cost of attendances at law schools will not typically automatically include dependent care in our cost of attendance, but
Gotcha.
almost across the board, financial aid offices are willing to work with law students who have dependents and can include some dependent care in the student's cost of attendance so that they're able to increase the amount of financial aid they might have access to make sure that their dependents are taken care of
Um,
while they're in law school.
and I'm assuming that would require the students themselves to be pretty proactive in reaching out to the financial office. Is that right? Or is there another way?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So if you are coming in to law school and you've got any situation that you would consider to be outside the norm for a traditional law student, the earlier you talk to the financial aid office, the better, because sometimes these processes can take a little while. Can require pretty specific documentation.
Mm.
And so if you know about those requirements ahead of time, it makes it that much easier while you're going through the process of getting things like childcare set up in a way that you know that the school is going to accept your documentation and be able to work with you to get funding to help cover those things.
Gotcha. And I think that that helps kind of show those that are watching and those that are listening that there are programs out there that each school has, not necessarily outwardly showing or telling their students that they have, but it's something that you just have to be proactive about. And I think most of the time schools want to work with their students who just got accepted into the school, so that
Yep.
that they exist. So I really appreciate that, Zach. Thanks so much. And this kind of brings me to my next question. Then we'll kind of go into a next section here on some practical tips. Although this entire this entire session has been very practical, and I've been very appreciative of that. But to those students who might feel maybe a little insecure or who are overwhelmed with, oh man, like I feel very financially behind right now compared to my peers, any advice that you would offer those students who are feeling that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I would go back to the overarching concept of personal finance and the
Yeah.
fact that that personal at the beginning of that is incredibly important. Nobody's financial journey is going to look the same as the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you are feeling behind, that is a perfectly natural thing to feel, especially in today's world of social media and everybody posting,
Right.
what looks like their perfect life or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. And so, what I would encourage you to think through is, what situations are you experiencing that are not normal for the
Mm.
vast majority of people? Maybe give yourself a little bit of grace on the fact that maybe you're
Yeah.
not exactly where you wanted to be, but that doesn't mean that you're behind.
Right.
Just means that that's where you're at the moment, and you're on your own journey. And yeah, that is in short, that is what I would recommend there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And anything that just you are you. Everyone is unique, and I even just think about the personal statements that every student turns in when they're applying to law school. That's your story. That's your baby, right? And so I think owning that just as much as you own your financial journey is going to be imperative for your law school journey and beyond, and what you decide to do after as well. So I am a huge fan of that. Thank you so much, Zach. And for the last kind of section here, some of the questions I have are mainly these, just maybe a phrase or some tips that you have in mind. But if you could give students, a kind of a short financial playbook, and that's a big question. It's a pretty loaded question, but what would it include in that kind of playbook?
There are quite a few different things that could be
Yeah.
included in that financial playbook, but I would say the ones that are most key
Yeah.
is, again, budget-based borrowing. So starting the process by building our budget or our spending plan ahead of time, and then figuring out how loans fit into that after we have considered all of our other financial resources that we're coming into law school with. Um, Also, would encourage students to begin thinking about the repayment process
Mm-hmm.
as early as possible. We have tools in the AccessLex student loan calculator where students can model future borrowing, both with federal student
Oh,
loans
wow.
and private student loans,
Okay.
and begin looking through what repayment might look like after law school. And because law salaries are so, um, you know, within certain ranges for the
Varied.
different pathways out of law
Right.
school, and they are quite varied. But there's also quite a lot of data out there.
Mm.
So the National Association of Law Placement, NALP, has a lot of really good salary data. The career development or career services offices at the students' law schools will have a lot of this data as well. So they might be able to give you information like median salaries for a
Mm.
particular area of law that you're interested in. You could take that number, plug it into a take home pay calculator, see what your actual potential take home pay could look like, and then start thinking through, okay, how does student loan repayment fit into this? Am I going to have the resources that I need to start repaying these loans? If not, is there a way that I can borrow less during the
Mm.
process? Or do I maybe need to pivot to potentially a higher paying position and things like that? So, as proactive as we can be
Right.
during this process, the more proactive we are, the better we are going to set ourselves up for success.
Perfect. And would you say, Zach, that those tips apply to those students who just got accepted to school right now? Like, what, if do you have any other
Absolutely.
really quick tips for those who are like, Zach, I just got in, I just got into this school, and I have my budgeting plan. What are the two other things that you think I should focus on right now? What's above all things something that I need to avoid?
So after we have our budget, we really want to, again, take an inventory of everything that's going on in our life financially. Any existing loans that we have, any credit card debt that we might have coming into the process, any savings accounts, any retirement accounts, all those good things. We want to know what our financial picture is coming into the process. So that would be one thing that I would really encourage you to do. But probably the second big one would be utilizing some form of loan calculator. The AccessLex student loan calculator is really helpful because we can import recent cost of attendance data for any ABA approved law school in the United States, which can really help you model that future borrowing. And I would start thinking through, even if it's not, this is my exact plan, this is how I'm going to repay my student loans and I know exactly how much I'm borrowing. I would run through a few scenarios. I would probably run through a best case scenario, where you get a really big scholarship and you're able to get paid internships over the summer. And so you're really not needing to borrow a ton for law school. I would run through kind of a middle of the road scenario where it's like, okay, some things really went my way, some things maybe didn't go quite the way I
Right.
was hoping. And then I'd kind of run through that worst case scenario.
Mm.
And I would compare possible loan repayments in all of those three scenarios, and then allow that information to start informing. Okay, what types of jobs will I be considering post law school, or do I need to switch up my strategy now? Do I need to find a way to lower my borrowing now? Because it is way easier to figure those things out ahead of time than after we've already taken the
Right.
loans out, and then we're locked in. We've taken the loans out and we're locked into repaying these, or trying to pursue some sort of loan forgiveness program. So I think the big takeaway word would be proactive. Be as
Proactivity.
financially proactive as possible. The
Yeah.
more things we can think through now, the more student loan repayment scenarios that we can work through now, the better we are going to be set up for financial success both in law school and after we graduate.
Amazing. That was just it so helpful, and I think it's hard to kind of give one word to such a culmination of information that you've given us. So I know that was kind of hard, but I'm really, really, really glad that we were able to, I think, give everyone listening the most important aspects of, hey, this is a reality. You have to consider this, and obviously we want the best outcomes for the students in the long run as well. So I'm just very, very grateful, Zach. And we've kind of made it here to the rapid fire round of the questions, and they're honestly really related to some of the other areas you've touched so far, but we'll be really quick with them and just give me the first kind of the words that come to your mind when I ask you these questions. Let me know when you're ready. You
Yep,
good?
ready
Okay.
for you. Yeah.
Number one, best financial advice for a future law student in one sentence.
Stay flexible.
Okay.
We encourage you to try to plan as many things out ahead of time as possible. And so having that plan coming into law school is really important,
Yeah.
but stay flexible within that because things are going to change. Emergency situations will come up. Life happens. So stay flexible. It is okay. There will be ways
Yeah.
that we can deal with anything that comes up.
Okay. One resource every law student should know about.
So, probably the biggest one is remember when we are a full time student and we have no income, that means we are considered a low income individual, which means that there are state level and federal level programs that we can tap into,
Mm,
things like Medicaid, things like food assistance programs. So, a lot of students view those things and feel like there's stigma attached
yeah.
to those programs. But
Right.
again, you are a full-time student, and this kind of connects to that staying flexible.
Hmm.
We need to be looking at all of the resources that may be available to us, and sometimes that may look like a state or federal program for low income individuals. And there is absolutely no shame in that. These programs exist for a reason. They're there to help people that need help. So be flexible and be open to receiving that help.
Be humble too. That's
Yeah.
what it's for.
Yeah.
So I love that. Okay. Last one here. If you could tell your younger self one thing about money, what would it be?
Ambiguity doesn't help. So so personally, I can be a little bit avoidant when it comes to my own personal finances, and avoiding the problem,
Mm,
pushing things down the line,
yeah.
worrying about it tomorrow. Those things have never really helped me out. In every case, they have ended up hurting me in some way.
I think a lot of
So
students are going to
any way,
relate to that.
yeah,
Like they're going to go, oh
yeah,
my goodness, I've definitely, yep, I procrastinate this and I just push it a little bit further. So you're speaking to everyone right now.
yep.
That's amazing. Yeah. So definitely just tackle it now is what you're going to say, right?
Tackle it
Or
now.
what you would
Yep,
advise.
be
Okay.
proactive.
Oh my goodness. Well, Zachary, this was beyond helpful. I think not only for myself, but for we covered I think aspects that are applicable to both pre-law students, law students, those non-traditional students who are coming in who have dependents, those who are not sure about what programs really entail. I think the traps that they can really fall into as well. We've covered a lot of things and I mean, you really just clarified a lot of I think the questions that I've had and questions that many have and situations that many are going through right now. So just on behalf of UCLI, we're just thank you and we're so grateful and this has been incredibly helpful. Thank you so much for breaking down everything and making it make sense. And for anyone listening, if you're heading to law school or currently in in the mess of it all, if you are trying to understand that there's a path for you and you're tackling that, there really is. Just stay flexible, exactly what Zach said. And if listeners need to find access to those resources, I think knowing that more there are more opportunities on campus at your law schools as well, maybe even pre-law advisors as well. You said it really really perfectly, Zachary, in terms of, hey, there's more than just what the government might offer. There's more than just paying out of pocket as well. So thank you for sharing your insights with us today. And for everyone listening, this has been Zachary Smith, and this is the UCLI Legal Lounge.